Recently, I posted a video with an AMA where you were able to ask any questions you wanted at all. Well, today I'm answering your questions, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today I am answering your questions. I will go through all the comments here on the AMA video that we posted a little while back, and I will answer all of your questions. This has taken me a little bit longer than I was hoping or planning for. There has certainly been a lot of other NHL hockey news that has kind of been taking over here, which caused me to be a little slower to answer your questions. But today is the day, so let's jump right into it here. So I'm going to be reading through the questions here. I have my tablet open in my hand here, which I'm going to read through all the questions and I'm going to answer them all for you. I haven't really taken the time to give these any thought, so I thought it was just best if I cannot answer them here just kind of off the cuff with my initial reactions to your questions. First question comes from Stephen Loeffler. He says, "Hey Mike, what are your thoughts on the KHL? And if you ever had enough money to go see a few KHL games, would you go?" Well, to be completely honest, it's something I haven't really given a whole lot of thought about. The KHL is pretty decent hockey. I haven't had a chance to watch a whole lot of it. I've mainly only seen the highlights. I know there's a few of you that have commented on the channel here before that said you watch KHL games, but not something I've really ever gotten into. I do think it's not quite as strong a league as the NHL, so the NHL is by far my favorite league. I would consider going over to see some games if I had the opportunity, but it's certainly not something that's high up on my bucket list or something that I'm real anxious to do. Next question comes from I Don't Give Kachuk, and obviously he also has a channel and he posts a lot about the Calgary Flames. He does do some other videos as well, so I'll certainly recommend you checking out his channel as well. He says, "Who is your favorite NHL legend?" Mine are Jarome Iginla and Lanny McDonald. Well, that doesn't come as a huge surprise given the fact that you're a Flames fan. For me, growing up, Wayne Gretzky was by far my biggest hockey idol. I mean, he's probably the reason I got into hockey in the first place. I was also a huge Mario Lemieux fan. Watching Mario Lemieux in some of those playoff series when the Penguins were winning their early Stanley Cups there was absolutely magnificent, to say the least. But those two guys, for me, I think right now will always be number 1 and 2. It's hard to say if anybody will come along and pass them at any point in my life here. Next question comes from Eddie Edwards, and he has a question about the new Seattle team here. He says, "If Seattle gets an expansion team, when they hold the draft, will there be exceptions to what position players taken by a team? For example, if a team lost a goalie to Vegas, can they lose a goalie to Seattle? If so, it doesn't seem fair. Past expansion drafts, I believe that this wouldn't happen. Also, does Vegas lose a player? They should. Why did the fee go up $150 million? Well, it's a lot of questions around expansion there. Now, I guess to kind of summarize a couple quick things, the reason why the expansion fee went up is I guess the NHL felt like they could justify charging it. As we know, the NHL's valuation of the league and what franchises cost is ever changing. Every year, the revenue is going up. So I guess they felt like they could justify charging a bigger fee. The Vegas Golden Knights will be exempt from the newest expansion draft, assuming that everything goes through like we expect here with Seattle. Vegas will not be participating in that expansion draft. So a couple things to keep in mind. They will not lose a player, but they also will not get a cut in that money. Now, as we know, with the expansion money, all the teams do get a cut of that big fee that the other new teams have to pay. So Vegas will not be getting a cut in that. And I know it might not seem fair because they've been such a strong team from the get-go here. However, this is not the first time this has happened. We've seen that kind of as common practice in other earlier 2000s of other expansion times here when the newer teams did not have to go through this as well. So it's not exactly a new concept. As far as any requirements around positions, there's nothing I'm aware of. If a team lost a goalie to Vegas or a team lost a defenseman, there's not going to be any requirements around that as far as I know. The rules around what they can protect and leave available are going to be pretty much the same as far as I understand, and I don't expect there to be any exceptions based on what they lost to, for a player to Vegas. Next question comes from Kyle Bachman. He says, "What do you think the Leafs will do this season? Will they make it to the finals with Tavares?" Well, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, as we've seen so far, the Leafs can score in bunches. They're very offensively talented. I do think they have a decent chance of certainly making it further in the playoffs. I would certainly consider them to be a cup contender. It's really hard to say if they can win the Stanley Cup, but I do think they're certainly in contention amongst a few other teams here as well. Kyle Bachman also asked a second question, and he says, "Will all the Canadian teams make the playoffs this year?" And I got to be brutally honest here and say no. The only teams that I think are pretty much a given to make it are Toronto and Winnipeg. I do think that there's a possibility teams like Edmonton and Calgary could get in. I do expect both of them to be improved. I would be surprised, but I wouldn't completely rule it out that Ottawa Montreal and Vancouver. I don't expect them to make it, but there's always surprises every year, and of course it'd be nice to see as many of them get in as possible. But I think the only sure locks are Toronto and Winnipeg. Next question comes from Jonathan LaRouche. He says, what is your opinion on the new third jersey for the San Jose Sharks? I think the new jersey for the Sharks launch here, their third, is a really, really nice jersey. Obviously, having Erik Karlsson come out to show the new jersey was kind of neat as well. Obviously, it was Karlsson's kind of debut on the ice for the Sharks with the debut of the new jersey. But I do really like it. I think it's a really sharp-looking jersey. Next question comes from Elizabeth Smith, who says, can you touch base on the Colorado Avalanche and Vegas Golden Knight rumors from Spectors Hockey about them being interested in Mark Stone? Absolutely. Mark Stone is a player who's going to have a lot of trade rumors around him until he either signs or is traded. Many guys, especially guys on one-year deals or on expiring contracts, are likely going to have a lot of speculation around them, as we've talked about in some of our trade rumor videos. They're typically the guys you see most mentioned in a lot of the trade speculation. And until Ottawa makes a decision on Stone, I do think it's quite possible. Now, Colorado, I think, would be a terrific trading partner for the Senators should they trade Stone, and hopefully they can recoup that first-round pick that they had to give them for Matt Duchene. Obviously, as we know, Ottawa's not expected to be an overly strong team this year, and if they get a real high draft pick again, it would go a long ways to helping them rebuild. So, obviously, I'd like to see that happen for their sake, but I do think that it makes more sense at this point for Colorado to consider a player like Stone more than Vegas, where they've already signed Paul Stastny, and then they traded for Max Pacioretty. I don't think Vegas will be going in on Stone, but I do see the Avs as certainly a possibility should that player end up being traded. Next question comes from RT Dude 1, who I assume is a Blues fan based on his question here. It says, with the new core group of players that the Blues have put together and the potential emergence of Kyrou, Thomas, Blais, and Husso, what do you reckon are the chances of them winning the Cup in the next 3 to 4 years? And will the Blues ever win the Cup? Also, I think I've heard you say Ottawa's your favorite team. Are you doing okay? How's your mental health? Just kidding. Yes, Ottawa is my favorite team. My mental health is just fine. Obviously, being a Senators fan here more recently in the past year has been difficult at times, but I'm doing just fine. I try not to get too personally attached to any players. I'm certainly used to many star players from that franchise being traded, so something I'm fully used to. So I just try not to let myself get too emotionally involved so that it's easier to deal with. But as far as the Blues goes, I do think they certainly could be a strong contender. In the next 3 to 4 years, I'd love to see that franchise finally win a Stanley Cup. They've been in the league a long time. They've had some good teams in the past, but they've never gotten over that hump to win the Cup. The big question mark for me with the Blues is their goaltending. Now, I'm a big fan of Jake Allen. I've mentioned on this channel here before, Jake Allen's from the same city as me. I've met him numerous times, know the family a little bit, so I do cheer for him personally, but I'd like to see him be more consistent, and I think he's the big X factor in St. Louis really getting over the hump. My other concern with this team is a lot of the players they signed as free agents. They're good players. I'm just not sure that this team is going to be quick enough to really keep up. So those are my concerns, but I do think it's quite possible here, especially with the young talent they have, that they could be a contender here over the next few years. Next question comes from Rugged English. He says, which team would you prefer to have the first overall pick in the 2019 draft, the Habs or the Canucks? Well, to be honest, I think, personally, if I had to pick, if it was just down to those two, I'd like to see Vancouver get it, because you know they're going to select Jack Hughes, and then you'd have Jack and Quinn Hughes play for the Canucks, which would kind of be the newer version of Henrik and Daniel Sedin. I know they're not twins, but still, a lethal pair of brothers seems to be the way the Canucks roll here, and I think it'd be kind of cool to see those guys play together. Next question comes from Cytility7. He says, hey dude, when do you think the Sharks will win the Cup? Well, to be completely honest, I think this year is the year they have to go all in. They've got a lot of guys under contract here that they may not have long term. It's really hard to say. They got Erik Karlsson. They have Joe Thornton, getting soon to probably retire in the near future. I do think that the time is now for San Jose. They need to capitalize and do whatever they can to get over that hump. If they don't get it done this year, if Thornton ends up retiring, you get Pavelski's getting older. If Karlsson doesn't stay, that's obviously going to set them back. So I honestly would love to see the Sharks win the Cup, and I would hope that between this year, this very well might be their year. Next question comes from Kyle Bachman. Says, who should back up Mike Smith in Calgary? Well, to be completely honest, I'm not really sold on any of their backup options. If Calgary really needs to make any moves, I think it would be to bring in another more experienced backup goaltender. I don't really think John Gillies is not looking the best. I'm not overly confident in David Rittich either. They do have some younger goalies in the system that could very well, be a potential future starter like a Ty Parsons, but he's not ready for that role as of yet. Next question comes from Snipe City. Now, you've seen them here appear on my channel before, so obviously Snipe City is another hockey channel. So if you haven't checked them out before, I certainly recommend you give them a try. Their question says, how do you think Kotkaniemi will do during his first couple years in the NHL? Will he be the #1 center that the Habs need? I do think it's possible that he does become the #1 center. I do see him being an NHL player. I do see him being a guy who has a lot of success and certainly can contribute. So far, in a few games he's played in the NHL, he's looked pretty good. Not totally convinced just yet, and it's only because of the small sample size that he'll be the #1 center they need. But I do see him being, at the very least, a #2 center and helping this team a lot here in the future. Next question comes from Robert Stacy. He says, will the Leafs sign Willie Nylander and will they trade Gardner with Marner and Matthews due at the same time for contracts next year? It's certainly possible. I don't think they can keep this full band together. I know we've heard Kyle Dubas say we can and we will, but I'm not sure that they can really pull it off without really sacrificing a lot of other parts of their team. Something's got to give somewheres. And if they are able to come to terms with Nylander, then Gardner might be the next camp casualty here that goes next offseason. It's hard to say. Obviously, they're going to want to sign Matthews and Marner long term. I think Matthews, between the two, will have to be the first contract. Marner doesn't seem to be interested in signing until he knows what Matthews is getting. At least that's my take. But if Gardner very well could be a cap casualty if they end up finding a way to keep Nylander in the mix. Next question comes from Twisted Wrister Hockey. Now, another YouTuber here with another channel. Obviously, he's appeared here before. You might be familiar with him. If not, I definitely recommend you check him out. His question says, which NHL arenas would you like to visit the most? Also, do you have any interesting stories about how you met an NHL player? Congrats on 1 year of Top Shelf Hockey. Well, thank you very much, Nick. I certainly appreciate the nice words. As far as arenas I'd really like to visit, personally, I kind of base it on what I've seen on TV and atmosphere. I'd really like to make it out to Vegas for a game. I think that would be really cool, especially now that we know, Louis from Vegas Golden Knights coverage. Be able to go to a game and hang out with him, I thought would be kind of cool. Certainly making it out to some of the California teams like the Sharks, Kings, Ducks. That would be kind of neat as well. Another arena I'd really want to go to is Winnipeg and Nashville. I think a lot of those teams really have great arenas, great fan bases, and it just seems like a great atmosphere that I'd love to see. I mean, I've been to other arenas. I've been to, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, and Boston so far. And those other ones are the next ones on my list that I'd love to make it to. Next question comes from Robert Stacy. He says, Sparks, Pickard, or McElhinney, who would you keep? Well, unfortunately, while I was waiting to make this video, that question's been answered. But to be honest, I would have done the same thing. I would have kept Sparks. I know McElhinney's a terrific backup, and it's hard to let him go on waivers. But I think Sparks, longer term, has the more brighter, longer term future. So I don't think you can take the chance to lose him. Next question comes from Tyler Stevens. He says, I'm a little skeptical about how much hype Rasmus Dahlin is getting. I've read comparisons to Orr. I think that's a bit much. How would he compare offensively to someone like Miro Heiskanen? Are they in the same ballpark? To be completely honest, I don't think so. I mean, Heiskanen is a pretty strong prospect, but everything I've seen, I do think Dahlin longer term will be a fair bit better than Miro Heiskanen. Not to take anything away from him, he does have a ton of potential here as well. Next question comes from TBL Fan. He says, after all the videos and editing you do, and the time you take to put out a video regularly, all I want to know is, did you have fun on your recent vacation you took not too long ago? Well, yes, I did. We went to Boston not long ago, about a month ago now, and it was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot of stuff. And Boston's a great city. If you haven't had a chance to visit it, I highly recommend it. I certainly had a great time, and it was nice to get away from the grind of the everyday stuff here between working a regular job and doing this. So it certainly was great. And he also says, my thoughts and prayers go out to the fans and families in Ottawa who dealt with a lot recently. Obviously, they had that tornado not too long ago as well, and they're certainly doing everything they can to help rebuild. There's been a lot of charity work and a lot of fundraising, so I know a lot of people there were impacted, and certainly my thoughts go out to them as well. Next question again comes from Robert Stacy. He says, do you think Ottawa will ever be a threat with the current ownership, and do you think they will move Ottawa to an American city? I do think they need ownership to be a real threat unless their younger players really surprise everyone. I don't see them moving, at least not anytime soon. And I would think if they did move, Quebec City would be the most logical option instead of going to a U.S. city. At least that's my take on it. Next question comes from Jonathan Christow. He says, what do you think was the best Stanley Cup of all time? And do you think the Avs have a bright future since they have Ottawa's first round pick in 2019? I do think the Avs have a bright future regardless, but assuming they don't make any deals and they keep that first round selection, then yes, they're certainly going to greatly benefit from that for sure. They're going to have their own pick plus Ottawa's. So I do think the Avs already have a lot of good prospects, but adding a couple more into the bunch, especially some higher rated ones, will certainly be a huge help as well. As far as the favorite Stanley Cup or the best Stanley Cup final of all time, for me, one of the most entertaining one was the Pittsburgh Penguins' Mario Lemieux back when he won the first Stanley Cup. That, to me, was the best one that I've seen, and I think it's just because of the timing and everything. Watching Lemieux put on the displays that he did with the offensive brilliance was absolutely mesmerizing for me. So for me, that's my favorite one, at least of all time. Next question comes from Joe Trouble Games. They said, when do you think Montreal will be a playoff team again? Really hard to say, to be completely honest, but I can see it probably taking a couple of years before they get themselves back up in the Eastern Conference. There's just a lot of tough teams that are going to be hard for them to pass here as they go through their rebuild. Next question comes from SDP Gaming. He says, that's a really cool shirt. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the Top Shelf Hockey shirt. I'd certainly, if you're interested, there's lots for sale, and there will be one given away from the comments on this video here once we hit 3,500 subscribers as well. He says, I'm glad I found your channel. What is your favorite AHL team and why? Well, for right now, I'd have to say the Belleville Senators, because my main favorite team is the Ottawa Senators, so I do watch their prospects quite a bit. So I do watch the Belleville Sens whenever possible. So that, to me, would be my most favorite. I know back in the day where I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, we've often had AHL farm teams here in the past. We don't have one right now, but there's been many here over the years, and I've certainly watched a lot of those games when they were here. It was mainly the Montreal Canadiens was the last one, and then back when I was really young, they had one that was shared between the Vancouver Canucks and the Quebec Nordiques way back in the day, as they say, and that was a lot of fun watching the old Fredericton Express. But currently today, it would be the Belleville Senators. One more from Robert Stacy. He says, Mike, I'm a Canadian living in the Midwest. Hockey is not big here, but you ease my pain. Keep up the good work. Well, thanks very much, Robert. I'm glad I can be of assistance to help you talk hockey and keep you up to date. I know there's certainly a lot of parts of the U.S. that I've heard don't get a lot of coverage, so nice to see that I can help in that regard. Next question comes from Mike Cappuccini. It says, do you think Kovalchuk can get 30 goals this year with the Kings after making a comeback from Russia? I do think it's possible. It's really hard to say. As of right now, he's yet to score his first goal since returning, and I do think that one thing that's going to be tricky for him is the speed of the game has changed drastically since he left. I think it's safe to say he can get 20 to 25 for sure, but 30 might be a bit of a stretch. Next question comes from Chris the Gamer. He says, hey, Top Shelf, what are your thoughts on the Vancouver and Ottawa situations and how well and how bad they are doing? Well, Vancouver and Ottawa are both going through rebuilds. I do think they have bright futures. They have a ton of prospects. And in Ottawa's case, they need new ownership, really. In Vancouver's case, they just need to be a little bit more patient. They've certainly got some great young talent there. And long term, I think both teams will be okay. Next question comes from Jonathan LaRouche again. He says, have you ever thought about doing highlight videos of best goals or saves? To be completely honest, Jonathan, no, I haven't. There's some other great channels I think are already covering that and doing a good job at it. It's not really my style. And of course, the other thing with NHL clips is that they do claim the copyright claim those clips in the videos as well, which can be a little bit of a hassle. But I know there's some other channels that are doing a good job with it, and I know I enjoy watching that kind of content a little bit as well. But no, I don't see myself ever going down that road. Next question comes from Robert Tanner. He says, if you could go see any team on their home ice that you've not seen before, who would it be, and who would you like to see them play? Well, I think if I had a similar question here not too long ago, asking about which arenas I'd like to go to. Personally, if I could go see any team on their home ice that I haven't seen yet, I think tops on my list probably would be Winnipeg, maybe Vegas. One of those two teams would probably be my preferred destination. As far as who they were playing against, I don't really think it would matter. I think the parity in this league is so good now. There's so many good, fun teams to watch, and there's still a bunch that I haven't had a chance to watch live. So, to be completely honest, I don't think it would really matter who they were playing. Next question comes from X25 Death Disco X. He says, how many points will Ty Ratty have for the Oilers this year? Really hard to say, but he's had a tremendous preseason. He had a strong finish to last year. I don't want to overestimate here, but I could certainly see maybe 40 to 45. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he goes beyond that, but he seems like he's really learned well how to play with McDavid and how to take advantage of that. So he very well could stick with McDavid's line, and if he does, I think 40 to 50 points is certainly a possibility. Next question comes from Jake Rogers, who says, what's your favorite hockey team and favorite video game? So as I mentioned in other questions here, Ottawa is my favorite team. I don't really have a favorite video game. I'm not much of a gamer. I do play the NHL games on my Xbox, which is rare and far in between, but when I do, that's really all I play. So I guess the NHL series is my favorite game. Next comment comes from Elizabeth Smith here, says, this channel is great. Thanks for the great content. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your support. Next question here comes from Stanley's Cup. It says, do you watch CFL? And if so, what team do you cheer for? I used to. I don't really watch it much anymore. Not really much of a football fan of either CFL or NFL. Once upon a time, I was a Toronto Argonauts fan, but that's so long ago. I did enjoy watching some guys like Mike Pinball Clemens was one of my favorites, Doug Flutie. But I haven't really watched CFL regularly in a long, long time. Next question comes from Cyberdale Coyote. It says, do you think there will be a lockout or strike in the NHL in 2020 or 2022? I really hope not. Obviously, like a hockey fan here, I don't want to see that happen, but I do think there are some key issues that could certainly get in the way. I really don't think it's going to be 2020. I think if it does happen, it's more likely going to be 2022 with the NHL trying to launch a new franchise. I think if the PA is interested in maybe ending that agreement early, that they very well might see the NHL kind of give them a little something to kind of sweeten the deal here to kind of make sure that doesn't happen at that point in time. They're not going to want to have a lockout around a new franchise launching in the league. So I really hope not, but I do have some issues that certainly could cause that as well, and I'm optimistic at this point that it's not going to happen. And the last question here comes from Adonis Leonidas, Flyers, Eagles, 76ers. What team do you cheer for and what team do you dislike the most? Well, again, as I mentioned before, the Senators are my favorite team. I don't really think I have a team that I dislike the most. I try to be pretty neutral when it comes to all the other teams. And, obviously the teams that are rivals with Ottawa, sometimes you can kind of get, into those games and kind of hate on them a little bit more. But really, it's one of those things that once the game is done, you let it go. I don't really say that there's any teams per se that I actually dislike or don't like or hate or anything like that. I try to be a hockey fan in general here once I'm not watching my favorite team, and just kind of leave it at that. So that's that. So that is all your questions. Thanks very much for taking the time to ask questions. This is a lot of fun. It helps you guys get to know me a little bit, and certainly gets to help me know the things that you want to know as well. So again, don't forget as well, there's going to be a giveaway once we hit 3,500 subscribers. One of the brand new Top Shelf Hockey t-shirts that I wore in the other video will be given away to one lucky viewer who commented on the other video. So that video has the comment section closed now. So once we hit that goal for the subscriber count, I'll go back and do a draw amongst all those comments. And like I said, you didn't have to ask a question. All comments were eligible for that giveaway. So stay tuned for that. I know we're over 3,300 now, so hopefully it won't be too long before the giveaway takes place. So again, thanks very much for asking your questions. It was a lot of fun, and I'll catch you next time.